Story 1. The hum of the refrigerators is the loneliest sound in the world. At 3:17 a.m., inside the glass and steel box of the Starlight Gas & Go, it becomes the soundtrack to your own slow decay. The air hangs thick with the chemical cherry of a failing air freshener and the ghost of burnt coffee. Outside, Route 89 is a ribbon of black silk, disturbed only by the occasional pair of headlights that slice through the darkness and keep on going. Most nights are the same. A trucker needing diesel and a hot dog, a couple of bleary-eyed kids on a road trip, maybe a state trooper. You learn the rhythm of the late shift, the quiet ebb and flow of a world half asleep. But tonight, the rhythm was broken. It started with the bell over the door, a cheerful, tinny jingle that sounded obscene in the dead quiet. The man who entered didn't fit. He wasn't a trucker or a tourist. He wore a dark, old-fashioned suit, the kind you'd see in a black-and-white photograph. It was immaculate, but looked oddly damp, as if he'd just walked through a mist I couldn't see. He moved without a sound, his polished black shoes making no noise on the grimy linoleum. He drifted down the snack aisle, his head on a strange, bird-like swivel. I tried my usual greeting, a tired, "Anything I can help you find?" He stopped and turned his head slowly. His face was pale and oblong, his eyes dark and empty, like drilled holes. He didn't reply. He just stared at me, a long, unblinking assessment that made the hair on my arms stand up. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, he turned back to the shelves and picked up a single dusty road atlas. He brought it to the counter and laid it down gently, his fingers long and unnaturally clean. He paid in exact change, a handful of dull, worn coins he produced from a deep pocket, all without a word. As I handed him his receipt, his fingers brushed mine. They were cold, not just cool, but a deep, cellar-level cold that seemed to suck the warmth right out of my skin. He took the atlas, turned, and walked out, the bell jingling his departure. I watched through the window as he walked past the pumps, not to a car, but toward the dark edge of the highway, disappearing into the oppressive blackness. I shook it off. Weirdos are part of the job. But a knot of unease had been tied in my stomach. The hum of the refrigerators no longer sounded lonely. It sounded predatory. A few minutes later, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound from outside. Thump. Scrape. Thump. Scrape. It was faint, coming from the side of the building, near the dumpsters. I peered through the glass, but the sodium lights cast long, distorted shadows that hid more than they revealed. It sounded like someone dragging a heavy, wet sack across the asphalt. The sound was methodical, patient. It went on for nearly 10 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it began. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I considered calling my manager, but what would I say? That I heard a weird noise? He'd laugh at me. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. They buzzed angrily before plunging the store into absolute darkness. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed at my chest. The only light was the faint green glow of the credit card machine and the red emergency exit signs that painted the aisles in a hellish, bloody light. The hum of the refrigerators was gone. The silence was a physical weight, pressing in on me, suffocating me. And in that silence, I heard a new sound. Tap. It was quiet, right against the glass of the front door. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Tap. Tap. My eyes adjusted to the crimson gloom. A shape was resolving itself on the other side of the door. A silhouette. The man in the suit. His face was pressed against the glass, his features distorted and pale in the emergency light. His breath was fogging a small circle on the pane. He wasn't trying the handle. He was just standing there, watching me. He raised a hand, the same one with the unnaturally clean fingers, and tapped the glass again, his eyes locked on mine. In his other hand, he held the road atlas, open. He slowly, deliberately, pointed to a place on the map, his long finger pressing hard against the page. He held it there, his gaze intense, demanding. It wasn't a question. It was an instruction, an invitation, a threat. Just then, with a loud, mechanical clunk, The main power surged back on. The fluorescent lights blared back to life, blinding me. I flinched, throwing an arm over my eyes. When I could see again, he was gone. The space outside the door was empty. The highway was a silent black ribbon once more. I didn't know if I was breathing until I let out a ragged, shuddering gasp. It wasn't a dream. On the glass, right where his face had been, a greasy, circular smear of condensation was slowly fading, and below it, a single, perfect handprint. I spent the rest of my shift with the door locked, sitting on a milk crate behind the counter, staring at that handprint until the sun came up. I quit the next day. I still don't know where he was pointing, and I pray to God I never find out. Story 2. The official name of the place is The Beacon, a cruel joke for a gas station squatting on a stretch of highway so dark and forgotten it feels like the edge of the world. By 2 a.m., the only light for miles is the sickly yellow glow spilling from my glass-walled box, painting the rain-slicked asphalt in greasy strokes. The night shift pays well, which is the only reason I'm here, listening to the lonely hum of the coolers and the rhythmic ticking of a clock that seems to be counting down to something awful. My first customer of the night arrived around 2:15 a.m. The bell above the door, a cheerful, out-of-place ting-a-ling, announced him. He was tall and thin, skeletal almost, wearing a dark coat that was soaked through, though it had only just started to drizzle. He didn't seem to notice the water pooling around his worn boots. He glided to the counter, his movements unnervingly smooth, and placed a single dented can of peaches on the worn formica. I avoided his eyes, focusing on the can. His hands were pale and waxy, the fingernails unnaturally clean. "That'll be $2.40, I mumbled, my voice feeling loud in the sepulchral quiet. He didn't respond. Instead, he just stared past me, at the wall of cigarettes behind my head. His gaze was so vacant, so utterly empty, it felt like I wasn't even there. After a long moment, he slowly reached into his coat and pulled out a handful of crumpled, damp bills. They smelled of wet earth and something else, something cloying and vaguely metallic. I took them gingerly, my fingers recoiling from their clammy texture. He took his can of peaches and glided back out into the night without a word. The bell chimed his departure, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. An hour later, the phone rang. The sound was a jarring shriek that made me jump. I picked it up. "The Beacon. This is Leo." Silence. Not the empty silence of a deadline, but a heavy, listening silence. I could hear something faint on the other end, a soft, wet, rasping sound, like someone dragging a soaked burlap sack across concrete. "Hello?" I said, my throat suddenly dry. The rasping stopped. A click, and the line went dead. I chalked it up to a prank call, a common occurrence out here. But the sound lingered in my mind. The drizzle had turned into a full-blown storm, rain lashing against the windows, and wind howling around the eaves of the station. Around 3:30 a.m., the bell chimed again. A woman this time, short and hunched, wrapped in a threadbare shawl that dripped onto the floor. She moved with the same strange, fluid silence as the first man. She bought a single road map of the state. Her payment was the same. Crumpled, damp bills that smelled of the grave. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door and looked back at me. Her face was a pale oval in the dim light, her eyes dark, bottomless pits. "Is he here yet?" she asked, her voice a dry whisper, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. "Who?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. She just smiled, a thin, bloodless line, and slipped back out into the storm. That's when the fear truly took root. This wasn't random. This was a pattern, a meeting, and I was at the rendezvous point. The phone rang again. I stared at it, letting it shriek. On the 10th ring, I snatched it up. "What do you want?" The same wet, rasping sound filled my ear, louder this time, closer. It was punctuated by a soft, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. It sounded like it was coming from right outside. I slammed the phone down and wheeled around to stare out the big plate glass window. There was nothing but the storm-tossed darkness. And then, with a groan of stressed metal and a sound like a giant exhaling, the lights went out. The entire station plunged into monolithic blackness. The hum of the coolers died. The clock stopped ticking. The only sounds were my own ragged breathing in the fury of the storm. The emergency generator was supposed to kick in, but there was only silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. My hand trembled as I fumbled for the heavy-duty flashlight under the counter. The beam cut a shaky, narrow cone through the darkness. I swept it across the store. Empty aisles, bags of chips, racks of dusty magazines. Ting-a-ling. The bell. My blood ran cold. The door had opened. Someone was inside with me. I froze. Flashlight beam aimed at the entrance. The door was shut, but a small puddle was already forming on the welcome mat. I swung the light around the small store, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. Nothing. And then I heard it. Not from outside, not over the phone, but right there, in the aisle with the motor oil. A wet, rasping breath. I didn't scream. The sound was trapped in my throat. I couldn't see anything, but I could smell it now. The scent of damp earth and river rot. Overpowering and foul, it was the smell of the money magnified 100 times. With a final strangled gasp, the generator sputtered to life. The fluorescent tubes flickered once, twice, then flooded the store with their humming, sterile light. The aisle was empty. The smell was gone. The only evidence that anything had happened was the dark, wet, vaguely boot-shaped print on the linoleum, slowly evaporating under the fluorescent glare. I didn't wait for the next customer. I didn't even lock the door. I grabbed my keys, burst out into the raging storm, and ran to my car. As I peeled out of the parking lot, tires screaming on the wet asphalt, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Another pair of headlights was pulling in, cutting through the rain. Then another. They were arriving. The beacon was lit, and I had a chilling certainty I was the only one leaving.